Hi, and welcome to Boom It's on the Blockchain. My name's Alistair Caithness, and in the background there we have Geoffrey Cann.
And here he is.
There he is, Geoffrey. You confused. I never even put an intro music because I was so excited with you going black, you know.
fade to black and then fade up
Fade
from
to
black.
So yeah, great to see you, Geoffrey. How are you?
Yeah, I can't complain. It's American Thanksgiving, so happy. Unless you're a turkey, it's a great day. If you're a turkey, it's not a good day.
No, the 46 million turkeys we were speaking offline are going to be gobbled today in America. You
know, don't be a turkey today.
Don't be a turkey today.
Bad outcome.
So just to kick off the show, then, Geoffrey, if you can give a little bit of background to our viewers and a little bit about your upcoming book, etc.
Oh, for sure. So my background is lengthy. You probably can't see, but there's quite a bit of gray hair here. I trim it all off because it's spiky and itchy. But behind the gray hair, first career with Imperial Oil in Toronto, which is what got me exposed to the energy industry in general, and then joined Deloitte and worked there for almost 30 years. Including 20 years as a partner, and in that capacity worked all around the world, and then left Deloitte after I had captured all the pension benefit. You can't once you reach that milestone, you can stay and work on that treadmill or go join a different treadmill. So I left Deloitte in 2018 and published my first book, which was called Bits, Bytes, and Barrels: The Digital Transformation of Oil and Gas. It set out the rationale for oil and gas to pay more attention to digital innovation, which was coming. And then I published my second book called Carbon Capital in the Cloud, a playbook for digital transformation in March of this year, 2022. And it sets out 9 case studies around best practice, or at least good practice. It's hard to say it's truly best, but good practice that companies can follow to accelerate their adoption of digital innovation in the energy industry. And for my sins, I live outside Vancouver on the coastal area. I moved here. Hey, there's my.
We'll bring in the book for everyone to see.
Yeah, exactly. As my website. I moved here because I was convinced that Canada would expand its LNG export industry to take advantage of the drive to decarbonize out of coal principally, but we do not have that many projects here. So I find myself living in a perfect place for the wrong reasons. There's no industry here. So instead, what I do now is I, of course, teach the interested audiences the insights from my book series. I am a professional speaker, so I travel around, or most cases it's virtual these days, delivering lectures on what's in my books and their ideas. And between that, I write a weekly article series about digital innovation in oil and gas. And I also have a podcast, which is called Digital Innovations in Oil and Gas. You can find that just about everywhere. Again, same topic.
Perfect. So I think let's just go over everything a little bit. So let's bring it back to people here. So, obviously the transformation in the oil and gas industry is happening now. Everyone's looking to move to green energy, but just give your overview and insight into the industry as it is right now then, Geoffrey.
Well, the industry has a significant new event, of course, which is the Russian invasion of Ukraine has thrown energy markets into a bit of a topsy-turvy state. Energy prices in Europe are sky high. This winter looks like Europe may be covered for energy supplies, but next winter may be a real crisis because it takes a long time, years, to bring new liquefied natural gas projects on stream to send energy internationally. The crisis has also given a boost to the ambitions for countries to embrace new renewable energy at a much faster pace than they have historically. COP27 just ended a couple of weeks ago with some announcements related to compensation to poorer countries for the challenges that energy and climate change are going to impose on their domestic economies. And in between all of that, the pressures on North American industry to embrace digital innovations have not changed because Two other very critical big factors that are impacting the industry. Number one is talent. Young people do not want to join this industry, and that's a problem because we're going to be relying on it for a very long time. We can't keep trotting out this message that fossil energy is bad for us and the planet, and then not have young people say, well, I don't want to be working in an industry that's bad for the planet. So the young people don't want to join the industry. That's a problem because it won't take long before we won't have the expertise we need to run the industry that we're highly dependent on. And the second major challenge, of course, is capital. Capital markets don't want to finance the industry. And so capital constraints are an issue. So we find ourselves now in an investment deficit. Not enough money has been poured into energy infrastructure. So now we're seeing the consequences of that. Energy shortages and energy security issues, high prices. And if you cast your mind forward, you can see how we have a big catch up to do, a huge deficit of energy investment we have not made. We're now going to have to make that at the same time as we're facing these pressures to change. And so the current state of this industry, I've lived through a lot of volatility. This is lots of downturns. This one's particularly, the industry is in a particularly tricky state right now because of the challenges of trying to sort through this shift in energy system for the future. It's very, very challenging for people to sort through.
Yeah, and I think, I always speak about coal production and what's happening in China and India opening all the coal plants as well. So I think over lockdown, India opened 51 new massive coal plants and China opened 181 and the rest of the world closed down 179. Yeah. So even though we're looking at moving out and always this big stop oil projects are happening there, but there's still mass coal production going on in the world, and they're using that for industrial production, essentially for all the goods and services. Now, I don't blame India and China anyway, because essentially they're the world's factory. America decided doesn't want to manufacture stuff. The UK specifically is a service country. And, just we don't manufacture anything in the UK anymore. And then, Canada's becoming similar to that as well. It's like you're importing all your products. So how do you feel that is balanced with everything else that's happening in terms of like carbon and CO2 emissions, and how it's a global problem, but we seem to be focusing on it in Europe and North America, but the rest of the world, they're pushing this back.
Yeah, it's exactly right. The capital markets, because Western economies, for the most part, have denationalized, or if you like, privatized energy in their domestic economies. In Canada, we no longer have a national oil company. That was that model disappeared 30 years ago. The United States has no national oil company, but if you leave the Western economies, the OECD economies, you frequently encounter a national energy policy that's state-driven and has national energy companies that are the sole sanctioned entity to manage, invest in, and grow and support energy infrastructure in those economies. And because of that, they are consistently less impacted or less motivated or less sensitive to environmental, social, and governance factors that Western economies are now very sensitive to because of our capital market access. You can't be. You can imagine if you're in a non-OECD economy or an OPEC country where the state is highly dependent on the resource industry, oil or gas, and the state's treasury is highly dependent on that resource. The issues of environmental sensitivity, which we have in the West, may not factor nearly as strongly because the considerations for those countries are so different. The amount of money that comes out of the energy industry that goes directly into people's pockets in the economies to keep governments in power means that they're not going to pay as much attention to the environment as we do in the West. So we have, to a degree, by creating an economy which is highly sensitized to capital market pressures and free choice by people to join industries or not join industries, we've put ourselves into an energy box, which is now at odds with the energy security challenges that the global economies are facing. And so therein lies the challenge. How long are we going to live with this? And especially when, you look around the world and go, well, hang on a second. Those guys over there are doing exactly what we're not allowed to do or can't do. And we're suffering the consequences because their CO2 it's a global problem. It's not a domestic problem. Mm-hmm. It's a great question. And I don't know the answer, but I do feel that there is a very strong sentiment in the Western economies that and certainly China absolutely sees this, that when you start up in new energy systems, once they get put into place, entry into those new systems in the future is much harder. So you want to be in at the ground floor. And if we're at the ground floor now of new energy systems being developed, now's the time to get into it, because it may be too late down the track. So the recent Biden Inflation Reduction Act is a really good illustration of how much energy and money is going to be poured into trying to sort this out. And we need to be thinking not of this as a problem, but rather it's the opportunity. It's the opportunity for us to chase, not to run away from, in my view.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. No, I completely agree with that as well. It's a transition that's happening. It's just like, how long is this transition going to take place?
Long time.
A long time.
a lot of burners out there.
Yeah, and then places like Iraq and Saudi Arabia, they're going to be the slowest to transition because basically they're pumping all the world's oil. But then,
well, and they've made it very clear publicly. Many of these countries have said we will be the last man standing. And when your oil costs you $4 or $5 a barrel to get it out of the ground, as it does in some of these OPEC nations, they as someone once said to me, is a great illustration. They can walk into the deep end of the pool and hold their breath a very long time. Whereas the rest of us, we start gasping for air pretty quickly. If the price of oil or the taxation on oil gets to a certain level, we very quickly start to shut stuff in because it's unsustainable. But they can go a long time because of the low cost of infrastructure.
Yeah, and then it comes back to some of the backward thinking, whereby you don't want to produce the oil here in the States, but you want to import more. So it's Biden going out cap in hand, looking for increases in production in Saudi Arabia, but then Saudi Arabia is wanting to cut production because essentially the global demand in other places is slowing up, And what I didn't realize was when they have lockdowns in China, how much that goes down in terms of the consumption of oil, like 2 million barrels a day.
Yeah.
So
let's go back to Biden, though, just as a point here. I don't believe Biden has the ability, your president, U.S. president, being Canadian, I can talk about.
Oh, yeah, I'm Scottish.
But here's my perspective there. I do not believe your U.S. president has any authority really over how much oil gets produced in the United States. He can't. He's not Exxon. He doesn't make those decisions. He can only create the environment or help foster the environment where Exxon will make that decision. And Exxon makes that decision not exclusively because Biden says it's a good idea. They do it because the capital markets tell them it's a good idea and that they will get a return. So and the capital markets have said very clearly, we're no longer all that keen to be seen to be investing in a product which creates a climate problem because we might be on the hook for it. Either because we are legally obligated or we have to pay for Scope 3 emissions we didn't generate, but we financed. So Biden has not much choice. He can't corral the 50 or 100 U.S. oil producers into doing anything really, other than from a regulatory standpoint. So who can control a single tap, right? It's the OPEC nation.
Yeah, you're talking about VC money coming into oil and gas. I think it was 2017. There was $200 billion in VC, and that was the small to medium-sized operators. This is outside Exxon, Chevron, all the big guys. Small to medium-sized, $200 billion. Last year, it was $20 billion.
Yeah, so the capital markets have spoken. We're not going to do this in this country.
That's a 90% decrease in capital spending and then in addition to that, they're struggling with supply chain problems and product as well. So they can't get the product to. So even though the oil's there, they've got the leases, it's all licensed, they can't get the product and they can't get the staff as well. Just what you talked about.
It's factors.
It's so many factors, and they can't get people. I know in like a lot of the smaller basins, their biggest problem is staff. They just can't get people anymore. They just can't get people to come there. They don't want to work in the oil fields. Margins become tight.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know what we were thinking when we started a campaign that said fossil fuels are bad for the environment, but we need people to work in that field. Like, I'm not sure we thought that one through, because young people listen to that message very clearly. Go, why would I put my career on the line for the next 40 years to join an industry you are telling me you're trying to get us out of? That's like saying I want to become a tobacco farmer. Well, maybe if my family has a tobacco farm, I might, but I'm certainly not going to go buy one and get into the tobacco industry or asbestos. Like pick a product we've demonized over the years. Like, we shouldn't be at all surprised young people are like, I don't want to work in this industry. Of course, like, they're just being completely rational. So anyway, this is why my book has 3 words in it: carbon, capital, cloud. Carbon is energy transition, decarbonization. Capital is money and talent, and cloud is digital. And what are those? How do those 3 forces come together? And how do we need to be thinking about our environment, our world in energy with these the big C's? Like carbon, capital, and cloud. That's the whole idea behind the book, was to get exactly this question.
Huh. It definitely, and then it comes back. There's so many factors that people don't understand, and then on the flip side is, you're going out there was Russia. Like most people in America, I didn't even realize how much the US used to import gas from Russia. It was 7% of the market space, 700,000 barrels a day, or 695,000 barrels a day.
Yep.
And it's like, so even though when they were doing all the sanctions to them, we're still sending them to massive checks every day for all the gas we're importing, because you couldn't shut down the economy. Yep. It's what you're saying, Geoffrey. It's like you've gone down this route whereby it's bad for the environment, but you still need the product. And then where are you going to get the product from? And it's a bit like Venezuela's now coming out. It's, knocking on the door. Time to drop the sanctions. We're ready to go, guys. Iran, we're ready to go. It's like these places, they're able to pick up the slack out there in terms of the industry. And people need to realize that without the product, what are you going to do? Switch the lights off,
That won't work either. Like, we really underplay or underestimate precisely how dependent global economy is on fossil fuel industry for virtually everything. There's not a tractor on Earth yet at any scale that will plow fields to grow food. So Elon Musk put a tweet out many months ago, but he said, look, you can't not have fossil fuels, otherwise you don't eat. Like, you gotta be completely rational here. And so that's where, we've kind of lost the plot a little bit. And I'm not sure how this plays out, but I'm pretty confident to say families, guidance counselors, high school teachers, sports figures, celebrities, I don't hear any voices of influence over young people today who are saying to those young people, hey, you might want to work in the energy industry. I'm not hearing. Nope. Where's the advocacy? So we should not be surprised at all that young people become TikTok entrepreneurs.
Yeah,
that's where the money is.
That's where the money is as well. So,
exactly.
Apart from my TikTok, I don't make any money out of it. But
well, you've got your viewership. Go for it.
Go for it. So we'll just go through the parts of the book. So you talk about this first section, digital framework. So explain a bit more to viewers how a digital framework works.
Well, the digital framework came about through a couple of observations. One was I was watching a lot of energy concerns pretending to be digital or being digital tourists. And so they weren't really looking at how digital could support them in a much more systemic way. And so that was the reason or the rationale for the framework, was to try and give people a simple, easy to apply, draw it on a napkin way to frame the role of digital in their enterprise. The framework has 3 layers, like a 3-layer cake. And I always start with the bottom layer because it's the top layer is the most important layer, but I leave that to the end because it's like the frosting on the cake. First thing is, what's the foundation? Well, the foundation layer is foundations like classic enterprise systems, cybersecurity protections, platforms, networks, basically the plumbing that you have to run your digital world. Part of that plumbing is blockchain technology, actually, because we have to find whole new ways to trust the world, and we are not going to have the people to run around to assure trust. And the traditional way of doing trust, inspections, audits, human oversight, are fallible. We found that with Dieselgate, and they're costly, and we won't have the people. So blockchain is how we create trust over a whole lot of our future infrastructure. And part of the top of that is cloud computing, because without cloud, you can't do very much of anything anymore for reasons I'll get into in a second. But cloud is how the world now accommodates this rapid growth of digital innovation. So the first thing you do is put your foundation in place. If you don't have the foundation, you can't even play. Now, that's necessary but not sufficient. The middle layer of the cake is what I call your digital signature ways of doing business. And there are 4 things in this. Number 1 is data. Data is the lifeblood of digital. And we see this now with the digital companies. They're masters at monetizing data and storing it and capturing it and doing things with it. So oil and gas companies, traditionally, we don't view data as an asset. We view it as an expense. And if it's an expense, you minimize it. You keep your costs down. You don't invest in expenses. You invest to get rid of expense. So data is kind of, we think about data weirdly in oil and gas, and the world has moved. It's moved to a new place. So that first challenge, how do you think differently about data? Second is, how do you generate that data? Internet of Things. Third is, how do you handle, interpret, and make sense of all this data? That's the world of artificial intelligence and machine learning. That's how you take all of this huge pile of data and make sense of it. And then the fourth thing is, how do you put the data to work? And that's robotics and autonomy. And in the framework, those are the 4 things at the very center, the center of this cake, this three-layer cake. Every business unit, every team, every company has and can create its own signature way of doing work by combining and recombining data, Internet of Things, machine tools, and robots. Tesla's cars, great illustration of this. Those cars have supercomputers on board, lots of sensors generating lots of data. The supercomputers then interpret all that data, machine learning and AI, and then they give the car automated driving capability. Now, it's not perfect, but the direction of travel is really clear. Now, if you can do that for a car, well, you could do that for a frac spread. You could do it for a drill rig. You could do it for a pump or a compressor, or all kinds of things in oil and gas. And so that's that digital heartbeat that we need in the center of our framework. And then if you do, you can buy those 2 layers of this framework, and you can do those 2 layers, but you can't be digital unless we rethink the people component of digital. As it turns out, kids, you and I, right? We both do TikTok and YouTube videos. Digital is very easy to do, but unless you think differently, you don't really succeed to the same degree as you could. And so the top of the layers is what I call digital capability. And that includes things like agile methods and iterative development tools and user experience and gamification and all these techniques we use to get people to work with digital more gracefully and easily. I mean, there's no training for Uber. You just get the app and you use it. Oil and gas, we don't think like that. We plan for apprenticeships that last months, whereas in the digital world, no, apprenticeship using these tools is much faster. And then the very, very top is people and change management, because the real big gap here is going to be in people and skills in oil and gas to work with and deal with digital. So that's what I call this the digital framework. 3 layers, a people layer, a digital signature way of doing work, of digital heartbeat, digital central layer, and then digital foundations. And you need those 3 layers to work if you want to be digital, truly digital enterprise. And then how you apply that to different parts of oil and gas is the creative part. That's where you need strategy and other thinking to really apply the framework.
So in your book as well, you speak about digital oil and gas. You spoke about it there, but
yep.
At what point is this a transformation into the industry?
So I'm at mixed views here. Prior to the pandemic, I would have said that it was very, 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 very early stages, if at all. And not literally not detectable. And then the pandemic hit, and the industry, like everywhere, right? We were forced into social distancing, and you had to do things all remotely. And the energy industry at that point discovered it had invested in, quite by accident, but it was there, all of the capabilities to do things like work from home and manage assets remotely, et cetera. And it moved very, very quickly to put these things into force. I tell a story on one of my keynote addresses. A big oil company in Calgary in 2016 confronted a massive forest fire in Fort Mac. It was headed to the town. It was going to burn the town to the ground, and they managed to put the fire out. But the oil company said, "Okay, we need to move our control room out of Fort Mac down to Calgary where it's safe." And this project dragged on for 4 years, dealing with all the issues and the objections and the challenges and all the problems it would cause and the inconvenience and where are we going to get talent and blah, 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 blah. Then the pandemic hit and they moved that control room in 2 weeks. What that taught us was that a lot of these objections are just bullshit. People should just get over it and move on, number one. Number two, we can move fast when we need to. We can move fast. And the industry discovered, third, is that all kinds of latent digital capabilities out there, cameras everywhere, machine tools to do monitoring of equipment, all that sort of stuff, meant that our industry could embrace change and react and adapt very quickly. So we've gone from pre-pandemic to undetectable to post-pandemic where we're at now, where I don't know of a single large oil company that has not established either a digital team or a digital enablement team. It's everyone is working on it now. And the challenge is the results are uneven and it's too slow. And that's why I wrote the second book together was, okay, so how do we accelerate this? Because we're right where we need to be in terms of energy transition and the like.
Yeah. And then the other thing we spoke about is like the changes in business models. So
yes.
So how does the business models change for oil companies going into this new energy age?
Well, the change can be fairly dramatic and very, very significant. As an example, because of these digital tools, cloud computing, blockchain, for instance, we are now able to take a piece of equipment that formerly you'd have to purchase if you're an oil company. You now can rent and consume just cycles of use rather than having to own the asset. This is a big deal when capital markets are not giving you capital to spend on your equipment. If you no longer have to buy it, but you can rent it, and then once you're done renting it, turn it back to the owner in a lease model, it transforms the economics of this industry quite a bit. That's huge. Second is as you get more and more autonomy, like more and more of our tools and equipment being operated or managed by robots or more robotically, we can pull people out of the business model. That's also huge for a business that's highly tied to availability of people in a world where people don't want to work in this industry. So those are just two examples. But my book has 9 examples of different business models cropping up. A big one is currency rate based. If you look around the world, countries like China and Russia are trying very hard to wean themselves off of the U.S. monetary system because the U.S. banking system, once you put a sanction on, the insurance industry, you can't get money to finance your operations. So how do you get around that? Cryptocurrency. Find some other way to create an exchange of value for your assets that allows you to not have to deal with the U.S. banking system. This is all going on, and we're not talking about Joe entrepreneur in Austin, Texas, trying to sort this out. We're talking national governments are trying to figure this out. So there's a lot of energy going into this, and that's going to change fundamentally how we think about energy purchase and sale down the track. When some country will say to you, "Happy to do an oil deal with you, but I want to be settled. I want to be settled in this cryptocurrency," and that's a big change, because it sideswipes the entire banking system. So that's just a third example. But again, lots and lots of examples of these happening.
Yeah, no, I understand with the oil coin concept. With Dan Eisner, who came up with that concept and developed that in terms of settling. Essentially it was a stable coin backed against oil price to do that. But it was amazing the differences, and that was floated around 2016. So now you're talking about, it's not like a new idea for people to realize that in 6 years. And then, as you say, I think people don't understand sanctions properly, but the US can easily put sanctions on countries because if you're using the US dollar as your main reserve currency, which most countries in the world
do,
and they say, well, you're not allowed to operate with Russia, otherwise, we'll turn off the US dollar.
Turn off your bank accounts.
They make it very, very difficult to operate with these people.
Precisely.
Suddenly it becomes difficult, and then and they want to get paid in the ruble, so they help the ruble stay strong where other currencies went down. I know we've had people speaking about the digital yen as well, that's coming in from China, that's for CBDCs. Everyone's in America and Canada are worried about central bank digital currencies, and Europe, how are they going to be the control? But, I was reading an article a couple of weeks ago that, China's already done 23 million in their CBDC already. So their CBDC is not some white paper. It's actually operational. And with, I think it's 128 countries now across the world, the number one trading partner is China.
Yep.
So a lot of the people think that it could be the digital yen by 2040. It'll suddenly be the number one currency in the world. And it'll be this transition where we're going into these types of currencies. And they're saying, well, we want everything settled in the digital yen rather than the US dollar now. Yeah. But then I had Emmanuel Daniel last week saying, well, a lot of the Chinese contractors who operate out with China, they don't even want to get paid in the yen. They want to get paid in the US dollars. So it's the whole thing's so complex that it's just people need to realize that. But as you say, the financial markets are changing anyway.
They are. You can't ignore that. And if China does come out with a digital, I'm not sure I'd call it digital yen. I think that's the Japanese yen.
There was the UAE yen. It's not yen.
Oh, won. The won.
Won, digital
won. Okay. There you go. There's the Scottish twist on things.
Yeah.
I used to live in Hong Kong.
That's the one that's, and they're ahead of everyone else. They reckon they're 5 years ahead of everyone else. In terms
exactly.
Of the development of it. So
in China's case, of course, they can go to the state banks, of which there are lots, and say, "Thou shalt use this currency from now on." And the banks are like, "Okay, well, now." So that's how they roll this out. The technologies can roll out in their economy, and they can figure it out. How do you settle? How do you transact? How do you deal with wallets? How do you deal with fraud? All that sort of stuff. They'll figure all that out in the domestic economy. And I feel like there's another example of a business model. Our business model for money, currency, and settlement more broadly is behind the curve. And we need to be mindful of that model. If it comes into oil and gas, we have a completely new way of thinking about oil and gas settlement, but far bigger than oil and gas.
Yeah, and then obviously I've studied the petro in terms of Venezuela developing the petrodollar, but the concept behind it is good. But they were using it to get around sanctions rather than using it for this technology to settle. But if you think of this ability to settle in a currency that's avoiding banking fees and international transaction fees, I think it was like $200 billion a year, and this is going back 2016. In terms of that's what people lose. They don't realize that it's a huge amount of money just in transaction fees.
Oh, it's enormous. Yeah. Visa and MasterCard are two of the most profitable companies in North America, and I sell books, so I have to pay fees to those guys, and I don't see a lot of value for the fees that I'm paying, considering 3% of every transaction just disappears off to Visa and MasterCard, and they've got 80-90% margins or whatever their numbers are. Like, it's ridiculous businesses. Not nearly enough competition in that part of our financial industry. Fortunately, that's changing very rapidly. So we might see our way out of it. But the business models, key part of the book is discussion of the business model issues.
Okay, so, and then as we're coming up to closer to the end of the podcast here, we'll talk about blockchain for energy as well. So obviously we both know about blockchain for energy, the team working out of Houston, Rebecca is the CEO, but just give your insight to blockchain for energy, what they're doing, and why is it what they're doing is pivotal to the future of oil and gas?
Well, so first, many big oil companies have concluded that to go it alone on blockchain will give them value, but real value release comes when a ecosystem is working to collaborate on blockchain-based business structures for document exchange, smart contract execution, and the like. And so the power of the consortium structure of blockchain for energy, given that no one oil company in the US actually can dictate terms to the total supply chain, unlike Walmart, say, Walmart's so big in retail, it can just say to its suppliers, this is how we do business, sign up, or you don't get, you're not in our stores. And most businesses will go, oh, well, I want your 50% of retail. I better be in your store. So, but that doesn't work that way in oil and gas. So there isn't one big guy or company out there that dictates terms. So the consortium gets together to answer that question and create enough critical mass to promote some of these concepts and ideas throughout the industry. So that's its key value promise. It by virtue of attracting oil companies and critical suppliers to it, like big EPC firms, it can now generate enough muscle to invest dollars first in a quasi R&D, but most of it's going into practical use cases, but can finance companies to go and explore hardcore use cases where value is released. And that's very hard to do when you're a startup, to try and get the industry to change. So by bringing that concentration of force into the one consortium structure unlocks the opportunity for the industry to really explore these new business models and proceed. So I'm a big believer in it, and I've actually described it in the book as one of the handful of examples in the industry where collaboration and cooperation yields a greater value than just straight pure competition. And this is a good example of it.
Yeah, no, I agree with that as well.
Yeah.
So just going to bring in, just so we're not 100% oil and gas here, we're going to speak about the future. But I was looking for an article that might get your insight to it, is the future of green hydrogen. So this is actually an oil price, believe it or not. So anyone out there thinks oil price only focuses on oil. But this article released yesterday is the world is racing to wrap up green hydrogen production.
Yep.
So what's your thoughts of this? Because ultimately, one of the problems I saw with hydrogen before is it's not the creation of hydrogen, it's the transportation of hydrogen. It's like, that's the good thing about oil and coal is, you can stick it on a ship and you can transport it in around the world and people can get it at the other end.
Yeah.
But how's hydrogen, how's that going to be beneficial in going forward? And do you really think it's going to have a big play in replacing fossil fuels?
Yeah, great questions. And the world is, there's a lot of money flowing into hydrogen right now to figure answers out to these questions. But here's a few things that rattle around for what it's worth. So one is hydrogen is a very small molecule, 2 hydrogen atoms. And because they're so small, they can penetrate the walls of metal pipe, make the pipe brittle. So whereas methane, CH4, bigger molecule, can't penetrate metal. So mechanically, just to move hydrogen around needs different metal. It's not like you can put hydrogen into our existing gas infrastructure and send it on its way and go, oh, well, we're good. No, it won't work that way. And I don't know about you, not too many countries, cities are out there tearing up their streets to haul and put in all new pipe for hydrogen. Japan's running a trial now where they're threading a hydrogen pipe through an existing gas pipe to figure this exact problem out. How do you distribute hydrogen in our infrastructure? So we have this infrastructure problem we haven't sorted out. Second problem is the burner tips. Like, I don't know what your gas heater, I don't know if you have a gas heater. I've got a gas hot water heater. I'd have to replace the hot water heater if I want to use hydrogen because the burner tip's not correct. So you're going to go to all these homes and have them haul out their burner tips. That's a lot of work. What about the fact that hydrogen's energy density is considerably less than that of methane because there's 2 hydrogen atoms, not 4. So you got half the energy density. You have to lower it to a much lower temperature to ship it anywhere. Because it's to get it into a liquid state, it's got to be minus 260 or some low, ridiculously low number. That means all new cryogenic ships have to be developed and put into service. Now you have to stand up a shipbuilding industry to move hydrogen around. Okay, so can't tear up the pipes, can't haul out the burner tips, got to build all this new infrastructure. Hydrogen, so has some promise, but it's going to be in very, very specific applications. For example, here's a great one. Imagine you operate a fleet of buses in a big city. And so every day they drive around the city and then they return to base. You could conceivably convert your buses to hydrogen because you could generate green hydrogen, say, from renewable energy at your bus repair depot or fueling station. And then as your buses come in during the day, you refuel them with hydrogen and send them on their way. Economically, you could see how that could work. Little microcosm, closed loop could work really well. But to think that hydrogen is going to be in your car or my car, we're a long ways from that. Battery technology is probably really good at the micro level for personal transportation. Hydrogen maybe at the ship level, where you're moving a vessel around or applying the oceans. So we're going to. There's definitely a place for hydrogen. Green hydrogen has some real advantages. You can make it anywhere where you've got renewable energy, which is just about everywhere, and has some great localized consumption value drivers. But to think that we're going to rip out all of our current energy infrastructure for hydrogen, bit fanciful yet. I just don't see it.
Yeah, I agree with that as well, Geoffrey. I remember Budweiser came out and they said they were going to transport all the beer around the Midwest with their hydrogen trucks back in 2018, and it was like $1 million a truck, and they were going to have 20 trucks? Yeah. So they're going to invest that, but then they realized there's nowhere else to top up their trucks with hydrogen because the gas stations got them,
Yeah,
so
no one,
to replace the gas stations with doing hydrogen, and it just becomes, as you're saying, it sounds okay in a microcosm doing that, but as you start to try and extrapolate that out, it becomes nearly impossible.
Yeah, I think the return to base model is a very good immediate application you could get to, especially if your capital assets turn over quite a bit. Buses might be an example, or delivery trucks, something like that. But if your capital doesn't turn over much, which municipality do you know is prepared to take its, I don't know, $500 million bus fleet and throw it in the garbage and or retrofit it all for hydrogen?
Amazon won't be doing that.
I don't even San Francisco, I would wonder. No, I don't see it. Yeah. Not in the short term. So we got a long ways to go yet before hydrogen becomes a heavy duty player in this. And but I'm not discounting it at all. It has some very attractive benefits. But we're going to have just to be very selective about where we deploy it, really.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So that's been great. So just to bring the show to an end here, I'm just going to put up your website there just now. I'll bring back in the book. Here it is, Carbon Capital in the Cloud. You can get it on geoffreycann.com. There's the book itself.
Yep.
There as
lots of stickies, because I'm constantly referring to different passages and content. People who get the book tell me they mark it all up because it's just chock full of useful stuff.
Mm-hmm. So perfect. Anything else you'd like to finish with then, Geoffrey?
So my latest project is during the pandemic, I worked with an outfit called Heroic Public Speaking out of New Jersey to create much more of an impactful on-stage presentation of my work. Prior to that, I was, Deloitte classic boardroom kind of presentation, but I've moved along to where I'm now at a much, much different level. And so as a professional speaker now, my real ambition is to take these works and put them in front of large audiences in ways that inspire and entertain and motivate them to change. My next later on next week, I'm going to be putting my presentation publicly through an association I have with Finboot, a blockchain company out of Europe. If people want to take it all in, it's 30 minutes, but you can see what would normally you'd have to pay $1,000 to go to a conference to catch it. I'm going to be producing it live for people to watch online. So I would encourage people to check that out and sign up for it. There's a link on my website for it. And
we'll put it all in the show notes as well. We'll get all
perfect.
People can do that.
That'd be great. Yeah.
So that's great. So, well, thanks very much then, Geoffrey. Appreciate it, busy guy. It's good to get you on Thanksgiving. So everyone else in America is off apart from me. So I'm off to eat some turkey in a little bit as well. So thanks very much for your time today, Geoffrey.
It's been a great pleasure. Thank you for your interest in my work.
Okay, thanks very much. Thanks to everyone at home. You've been watching Boom It's on the Blockchain. My name's Alistair Caithness. Have a nice day.